Hello, my name is Dr. Maya Byfield. My business is The Phenomenal STEMist. I'm so excited to be here in Orange County because it's where I live. I live in Apopka, Florida. And I decided to make this business because I saw a need for underrepresented students to be successful in STEM, which stands for science, technology, engineering, math. And the best way I can do that is just provide products for parents to prepare them, whether it's a book or online STEM camps or just video podcasting. My goal is to transform this community, especially those who are underrepresented. And the way to do that is to help parents understand their children's minds and basically develop them at different stages of their lives to be prepared for a successful STEM career. Thank you so much. That's why I'm here. Hey, 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 it's the phenomenal STEMist. Can you hear me?
I hear you. Can you hear me?
I hear you well. Yeah, yeah. It was
Okay.
my it was my microphone. I figured it out. Um I'm so excited, guys. I took off a couple of months to really focus on phenomenal financial freedom, but phenomenal first Sundays is back, and it's back just in time for the new year 2024, and I have an awesome guest. Um I had a friend from elementary school with your name. Now there's two
Yeah.
ways of pronouncing it. We didn't get a chance to really go through that, but Khalid or Khalid, how do you pronounce your name?
I like Khalid. That's how they say it over in the Middle East. So yeah.
Yeah. So we pronounced it Khalid as well back in elementary school. So I'm excited to have Khalid Paris. He is coming from the great Oakwood College, now university. He has a bachelor's of science in biochemistry. And then he went to the Ohio State, where he received his MBA, and he is currently finishing up his PhD in the biomedical sciences there. So I'm excited to talk about his blend of business with biomedicine. How are you?
Doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. I'm excited to have you here. Is this your first live? Have you been live before?
No, no, I don't do podcast. I do a lot of like presenting, but I don't
Yeah.
do this kind of stuff. No.
Right, right, right. Well, I'm happy you're here. We're gonna jump right into it. I
Okay.
have a couple of questions for you. Before I do that, I want you to remember, guys. Please, please, please subscribe to the channel. And don't forget, Phenomenal STEMist is available on Amazon as we speak. If you want to teach your children how to be successful in STEM, we have someone right here. He's going all the way to the PhD in STEM. So it's very possible for your children to be successful, but we want to learn some different ways of being successful. So today we're talking about um, how to become a biotech entrepreneur. So tell me, Khalid, when did you fall in love with your discipline?
So we'll go all the way back to high school. So I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, and there was actually a church member from my church here in Columbus who started a program called RAP, Research Apprenticeship. I think it's
Hmm.
Research Apprenticeship Program at Ohio State. So they would take minority students and place them into research labs at Ohio State and allow them to learn how research begets medical uh, yeah, therapies, right? So
Mm,
the summers of my junior year and senior year in high school were spent doing research at a molecular pathology lab at Ohio State.
Nice, nice. You and it was so wow. That's it. That's important. The church helped to forge some kind of network or how do I say, yeah, network. I think that's a better with a institution in the area
Yeah,
and
so
sent their parishioners there. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll talk about networking, how important it is later on because we don't know that in science.
Yeah,
But yeah, you're absolutely right. It was an opportunity that hopefully we can get going again because they have these programs all over the country, especially like in your Ivy League schools. A lot of your
right.
Ivy League schools are in rough neighborhoods or in neighborhoods that have a lot of diversity, right? And so they have similar programs for kids in high school. They want to bring us in.
Yeah, so it's important for all villages in like any village where where there is a network of students of color to get access. I would have never thought it was the church. Usually it's schools
Hmm.
building that, but okay, cool. All right, so you fell in love so you were in high school and you
Hmm.
had it sounded like you fell in love with the opportunity. So it wasn't even like you were in love with it when you were a kid. It's just when you got an opportunity and you learned it, then it's like boom, I have access.
Well, so I was always taking apart like telephones and stuff, getting in
Yeah.
trouble for trying to figure out how things worked. And my mother, instead of buying G.I. Joe, she'd buy like a microscope set, right?
Nice.
So, and then she always worked at Ohio State, so maybe I would go see her. She was an office assistant, so I'd go see where she worked, maybe at the emergency room or something like that. So I was a little curious, and this kind of gave me a way to focus my curiosity into maybe understanding uh, cell biology. This was in
Yeah.
the 90s, so this is,
Way back.
the first, I will tell you, the first summer I was there, they had just come out with in situ hybridization and some like automated forms of looking at DNA sequences. So
Yeah.
before you'd have like a large uh, X-ray film, and
Machine.
you just
Yeah.
sit around eating pizza, picking out which base was next.
Yeah.
So yeah, I got to see like from the beginning stages on, but
Yeah.
it was through the network.
Yeah. You got access through the network and then
Yep.
and that's key. Okay, so what tools did you use to discipline yourself to succeed? So you have a bachelor's degree, you
Hmm.
have a master's of business administration, you are currently finishing up your doctorate. Like
Hmm.
what what tools did you use to I think those kind of things require discipline.
So I did everything in reverse.
Mhm.
When I got, my father's from Brooklyn, New York, from both sides.
Ah,
So yeah,
New
so we
York.
would, so New York was always a second home, right? I remember New York in the 80s. Like I remember when Brooklyn was really Brooklyn.
I know.
I was actually in Brooklyn 2 days ago, so I just flew back. But it's totally different.
It's
But
totally different. I was there
yeah,
last year, and I'm like, who are these people? Where is Bed-Stuy? I don't know what's
yeah,
going on.
it's it's not Bed-Stuy.
It's not.
So after Oakwood, instead of coming back to Ohio, I went to New York. Um, Funny story, first job, couldn't get a job for like 10 months because the tech bubble was just starting to kind of burst. So my first job was actually in Rikers Island.
Wow,
I
Rikers.
yep, I was hired by St. Barnabas Hospital in '99, and it was real quick. Hey, you love this job, and they didn't tell me that I'd be on Rikers doing like deliveries to the prisons and whatever. But so that gave me
Wow.
motivation to get
To
out
get up
because
out of there.
I'm from Ohio, man. I'm working in the largest lockup in the Western Hemisphere. Um, so then I got hired by a PI in Albert Einstein College of Medicine, and so he did some really weird things. He's my scientific mentor, Dr. David Weinstein, MD, PhD. He had a weird way of like evaluating. He would talk to you and look at your hands and see if you could perform maybe intricate surgeries, and you know,
Wow.
he'd throw you right into the fire with some tough cell biology things. And but that was his way of checking to see if it was worth his time, you know?
If you had the
Um,
hands, that was key in
yeah,
grad school. Did you have the hands? I remember that. Yeah.
yep. And so, you're absolutely right. And so, when we were working at Albert Einstein, he was actually forming a biotech company. And he started that company um, at the Audubon Research Center, which is right across the street from Columbia Medicals. It's where Malcolm X was assassinated. They turned
Yeah,
that
yeah,
into a
yeah, yeah, the
bio.
audible.
Yeah, that was New York City's, I think, first attempt at a biomedical research park. So we were there, and that's when I started learning my lessons in terms of this isn't academia. Academia is kind of relaxed, and now I'm working for a private company with investor dollars, and so they want results. They want to see that you're focused on what they invested in. And so some of the things I learned was that you have to be steadfast when you know you're right. You're going to have to argue your point, especially if
Hmm.
you're black or or underrepresented minority. Excuse me. You have to accept criticism and do better. So,
Whew.
an example of that was that
Whew.
Cleomed
Whew.
was a neurobiology company, right?
Yeah.
And so we were looking to kind of solve some diseases that could occur with, you know, astrocytes kind of dissociating from neurons and growing spontaneously, like gliomas. And so we were working with Columbia's uh, top two neurosurgeons, Dr. Peter Knoll and Jeff Bruce, and these guys are world renowned. You know, they make a ton of money. They're in high demand. They don't want to come across the streets of the lab and hear that something failed. That's a waste of their time, and that's how they would talk to you,
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I had that experience where it was like this wasn't worth my time. What that meant was do better, and
Do
I
better.
did do better, and I actually got accolades. So getting accolades from those guys meant the world to me. You know, I was in my early 20s at that point.
Hold
Um,
on one second. Take your time because you're giving me some good tools. And I feel like this is one of our biggest issues in our community. We are extra sensitive to criticism. So, number
mhm.
one, what did you say number one was again? Because I'm really caught up in the second
You,
one.
you have to be steadfast. When you don't,
Steadfast,
yep,
argue your point,
yep,
and the first thing that people don't like is that concept because I feel like as scientists we do that. We're not
yep,
gonna just back down. Number one, especially if you're a person of color, don't be intimidated. Don't be
yeah,
intimidated. If you know
yep.
you're right, argue your point. Number two,
Accept that criticism, man.
accept criticism
Yep,
and do better. Like,
yeah.
what is the big why is it so difficult for people in that situation? I feel, Khalid.
So I'll give you an example. So Gleamed started the terror attacks, right? We started September 1st,
Ooh.
2001, right? So you had that money, Wall Street money was gone, right? And then you had the scandals of Enron, Tyco, WorldCom,
Yeah.
and then the big one for us was Martha Stewart and uh, Imclone,
With
because then
yeah.
investing in biotech. So what that meant
Mm,
was I had to take expired enzymes and make my own reagents or find a lab that was closing and kind of piece together what I could take from them to make my own experiments work. And a lot of times we want a kit that just tells us exactly what to do. And sometimes you have to make it work with what you have. Um, and that comes with criticism. You
right.
know, if I invest in your company, I don't know, I don't care what you have to do to make that experiment work. I want to see results for what I invested in, you know? So the third thing and this is early in my career,
Mhm.
third thing I learned was always tell the truth
Mm,
because especially when you're working for a private company, there's a chance that your data could be used in a clinical trial,
right.
or it could be used for someone to give $30 million. So you have to tell the truth, even when you made a mistake.
Yeah. Wow.
Um,
That takes integrity.
oh yeah, oh yeah. But see, the other side is I've seen people fail because they didn't tell the truth,
Yeah. You see,
you know?
you've seen the
And
ramifications.
I've seen it. I've seen it firsthand. Um, Fourth thing is be thorough. That needs no discussion. And then the fifth thing was interesting. Dr. Weinstein always taught me to study your failures. So Elon Musk does this, right? That's how he's constantly improving. You fall forward.
Yeah.
Um, Dr. Weinstein would say there's value in what you think was a failure because it could lead to a new discovery or a new concept that we can then shop around to get more funding with, you know?
Yeah, I was just talking to my friends today about something that I was failing at, and they were like, "Why are you saying that you're failing?" And I didn't even feel bad about the statement because I feel like when you can understand where you need improvement, even though you can speak more positively about it. I mean, it is very
Mhm.
helpful uh to not speak negatively about your failures, but I I seek out things that I need improvement on. That's
Yep.
it's how else would you improve, you know?
So that's a key
If you
point.
don't.
Hold that point because I want to talk about that same point in business school.
Okay.
I can talk about
Yeah.
that. That's one thing that they teach. They're like, okay, you're good at cell biology. You're not going to do any cell biology. We want you learning finance because you don't want to be a master of all trades, but you want to understand the full scope of what you're working on
Yeah.
and not just do well with what comes easy.
What comes easy, what come right, that's
Exactly.
critical, and I feel like
Yep.
many of my students, we're talking to all kinds of people, including students. They when they're
Mhm.
studying, they only they when they get something, they go over what they get over and over again. It's usually just to boost
Yep.
their self esteem,
Yep.
because when they have to
Yep.
take something that they're struggling with, they feel bad about themselves. But I think the key thing is don't let it define you. Like, do
Ah,
do what you're
nope.
not comfortable with. Yeah.
Yep. That's what you have to do to grow.
Okay.
So I think I gave five.
Five
That
five
was early in
tools.
my career.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was early in my
Uh-huh.
career. Um, Business school changed everything.
Okay.
Oh my goodness, it changed everything. So the biggest thing I learned in business school was use your network. Two things: use your network and know your value or the value of your contributions.
Mm.
Um, and I think I spoke about this when we were talking earlier when we were texting.
Mhm.
Um, I worked for a flavor and fragrance company that was trying to see how changing perception of how neurons are received by the olfactory nerves,
Mhm.
how that changes how we perceive smell and taste.
Mhm.
And so one of the goals was to knock down malodors. It sounds funny, but it's really a big issue, like bathroom odors, right?
Right, to
Be, right. So, and that's because Bill Gates actually came up to the largest flavor and fragrance houses and said, "Hey, I want to install these latrines in developing countries so that they don't use freshwater drinking sources for the bathroom." Right?
yeah.
But the problem was when he developed those and tested them, people stopped using them because they
They
stink.
stink.
These are
Yeah.
yeah, these are temperate, these are hot environments, and the smell's going to be really bad. So he said, I need you to temporarily knock down that smell. And I used what I learned. They had a protocol already for looking at these neurons and seeing you know, how they work um, against different odorants. But they could only maybe monitor 100 neurons per day. I used what I learned from GliaMed with neuronal culture and boosted that to where we could see 8,000 neurons per day. So I
Wow.
wrote my own protocol. We won that contest. That protocol got patented, and it was used for Bill Gates' initiative. And that was maybe 12, 13 years ago. So now that same technology is clearly being used for products that are going to be marketed. Um, I got $1 out of that.
Mm.
So so what they do is they tell you to sign a contract, and what you made belongs to the company, and that's cool. But I saw that the business people who were are presenting my data were doing way better than I was because I was spending 9 to 13 hours a day in the lab, and they're flying all over the country, all over the world,
Marketing.
meeting, yeah, and they're not having to do the work. So a conversation with one of my friends who I worked with he said, business people know their value, scientists fall in love with their jobs and forget what they're worth.
Say it again. I
And
don't rewind. Rewind.
business people know their value. And scientists, we fall in love with the projects and we don't consider the value that we're putting in. And that's why I went to business school.
Wow.
I was already maybe 10 years into my career and I realized I needed a change. I can't let that happen again, you know.
Love it. Love it.
Yep.
That is I want that was very important information, and I think more and more scientists, definitely at the postdoc level, it's important for you guys to know your value. That's
Yep.
why I actually left. I didn't do a long postdoc. There's no way I'm staying. I did
Mm,
1 year,
mm-mm.
and I'm like,
You
no.
they
I knew my value. Like I just saw. I saw that. I saw it, and I've spoken out about it, and it's like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing
no, they yeah, they what they're doing is they have an initiative, right? And so the PI's name is going to go either first or
that.
last.
Mhm.
That's the most important person. That's the lab head.
Mhm.
You clearly know the project and you're trustworthy, but we're still going to pay you as little as possible
Mhm.
to keep you here because I don't want to deal with turnover. I don't want to train someone else. I want you to train all the people who are going to come and go, and I want you to stay.
Mhm.
And no, you cannot get stuck in
Don't
that
get stuck.
chasm.
Don't get stuck.
Yeah.
I don't know who's watching. Don't get stuck. All right.
Mm-mm.
Next question.
Okay.
What were your challenges in school? What were your challenges in school?
Um, so I think I might be dyslexic because I think my daughter's going through it. I never got tested, so that was always an issue. I liked science and math, but I didn't like reading. So
Mm.
um, I stayed away from the subjects that required a lot of text. Right? I didn't stay away from it. I just didn't put a lot of time into them. And that goes into the conversation I had with my coworker at this flavor and fragrance company was um, there's some disciplines in school that allow you to network, right?
Mhm.
And once you network, and a lot of times your network gives you that career defining job.
Right.
And so if you're like me, where you just like being a scientist, but you're only networking with the few people in the lab who also stay in the lab and don't talk to anyone else, and then you graduate and you can only get a job at that same university because you don't have a network outside of it.
Yeah.
Business school changed that. It showed me a completely different life. So I didn't understand the other part of school was I didn't understand the broad picture, um, which was uh, like what's the value or what's the reason why you're doing this project. So you know a lot about this receptor and how the receptor activates after a ligand binds to it.
Mhm.
But what does that mean? How is that going to help people? In school, you're just trying to learn more and more about it, but
At the small level.
globally,
Mhm.
yeah, we're really trying to help people and develop therapies. And if your project is not going forward in that manner, then maybe you should, you know, dissociate yourself. So that's something I didn't understand in school that I definitely know now.
You learn that you should disassociate yourself from things that don't really aren't relevant. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yep. Yeah, yeah, and sometimes science gets phased out.
Yeah.
And so the other thing is you can fall like molecular biology, a lot of that stuff is getting automated. And so, the other part is you have to keep learning and try to stay away from those disciplines that can get easily replaced.
Especially with artificial intelligence. Like
Yep.
I
Yep.
I was just talking to someone that, biomedicine is it's getting it's transitioning. It's
Yep.
transitioning, and you got to learn. I'm learning to code myself. There's some things that you have to learn that I hope people can hear. I don't see anybody commenting, uh, but I think everything's okay. I got a call, so I'm not sure. I see a couple people watching, a few people watching. Please text in the chat if you can hear. I feel like I see the green button.
Cool. Cool.
Um, so yeah. So anyway, um, yeah, back to my point, like you have to stay relevant, and there's a lot of phases that are getting, I mean, a lot of disciplines that are getting phased out, and
Mhm.
so yeah, so I have people saying that here. Cool. Yeah. All right. So that was your challenges. Was that? So you're saying that was a challenge, though? How was that a challenge? It's a challenge because you were getting stuck into something and you weren't networking
Yeah,
yourself way out. Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
so it was I was just getting stuck in doing the best I could for this project and not looking
Yeah.
to say, okay, is this project going to be purchased by another VC group? Are we going to get acquired by a bigger pharma group? Um, what happens if I can't prove the MOA? And
Yeah.
so,
What does
like,
MOA stand for? Hold on.
the mechanism of action. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
like, I needed to understand kind of globally, think globally in terms of how does what I'm learning impact my future in 3 years?
And you weren't
And
doing that.
was not doing that initially. Business school changed everything. And I encourage
Everything.
people because of the competencies that they teach in business school, I encourage everyone who possibly can. You don't have to get an MBA, but take some of those classes because it will change your life. Leadership classes, negotiations. I had a sister from Chicago with a PhD who taught my negotiations class, and I learned a whole new way of dealing with people.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
um, leadership had people, CEOs from these huge companies, and had to make tough decisions like mass layoffs, and they went into detail. Some of them were crying about the decisions they had to make. Um, Finance that you never deal with finance in the research lab. All that's done by the school's office, but
Yeah.
you have to keep a
And
budget in
finance
mind.
matters.
Yep.
Finance matters. And to your point, I took a couple of while I was in grad school and things were getting in a lull, like when I'm
Hmm.
in, I'm sure you're in it where you're just doing your research and you're not
Yep.
really, you just like working. And
Hmm.
I said, okay, let me take a couple of classes, and I took a couple of finance business classes, and it
Yep.
changed my life in terms of
Hmm.
how I even manage my money now.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. They don't teach us that in college. They don't teach us that in graduate school. If you're a
Nope.
scientist, you got to
Nope.
find a way. All right. So, number 4 question. What is your like what do you do,
Hmm.
and what have you done, cuz I know you're in school also. And what is your typical day in your line of work? So like
Um,
tell me about your what you've done in terms of an entrepreneur. You could talk a
okay,
little
you
bit
want me
about what you do in grad school, but I want you to focus on what you did as a biotech
as
entrepreneur.
as an entrepreneur? So,
Yeah.
see, I made some notes here. Okay, so do you want me to tell the story like how we even started the company? Do you want to talk about that now
Yeah,
or yeah? Okay.
yeah. This is
So
the time. This is the time.
okay, so I'm the oldest guy in my MBA class. I started school when I was 40 for my MBA, right? Came back to Ohio, bad divorce, had to start over. Had the conversation with my coworker in New York and knew that I couldn't just stay on the bench doing research. So go through the first semester of MBA school, got my butt kicked because it's tough. They told us in the beginning we're going to give you more work than you can handle, and they do.
Mm,
People are crying, people are having breakdowns. It's rough. So you get through the first semester. Um, Everybody meets at a bar, right? That's what you do because you're constantly networking. Now, I don't drink, so I'm kind of standing near the door, but I knew the value of networking, so I'm
right.
standing there with my little juice, So you have to learn how to navigate those situations. You can't just say no, I'm Adventist, I'm not going to go. You have to know how to
Yeah.
navigate it. So I'm
Yeah.
standing there, kind of close to the door, and one of my classmates walks up and starts talking to me about, his background. And he said, you kind of are unique because you were clearly a scientist with no business skills. I was like, yeah, you're right. He asked me about a project I worked on. I told him about some really cool drugs that regenerated tissue that I felt the work was unfinished. And he said, well, let's start a company. And I'm like, you don't start a company like that. We come back from break, and he already has a meeting lined up with one of Columbus's biggest law groups. They have
Mhm.
an FDA advisor there. They like the idea. They want to sign this. I said no. I said I wanted the best law group for biotech. So like a month later, He's on a class trip to the Bay Area. Ohio State is a really big school, and so their
Right.
network is global. And so when they send you to the Bay Area for the business school and then in the MBA program, they're sending you to meet venture capitalists like the biggest ones, Sequoia, Google Ventures, because they all had people from Ohio State scattered around. And so he calls me back and he said, "What's the best law group that you would feel comfortable with?" I said, "WSGR, Wilson, Sonsini, Goodrich, and Rosati." He said, name a lawyer, I'll get them for you." He's like, "I'm
Wow.
at their global headquarters right now."
Wow.
And
Network.
and I, yep,
Network.
yep, yep. And so I found um, someone with a chemical engineering degree and a JD. He called me back. They're not going to give us him. They gave us a senior partner with a PhD in chemistry and a JD for
Wow.
business stuff. And then they gave us a team for our patent stuff, right? So now and this is the group, this is the law group that started with like some of the biggest names in the Bay Area in Silicon Valley. So they have money and they have enough money where they could invest. So because there was an Ohio State alum there, not only did they represent us and give us, incentives of close to $50,000 for free, but they also invested, I think it was 20 or 25 grand in our company. And he told me that, and he said, would you start the company with me now? Yeah. And this guy is, no
Wow.
shade, but this guy's like, he's from Indiana. He's a Trump fan. People were scratching their heads like, why would you start a company with him? And I said, well, off of a conversation in a bar, this guy went to the law firm I said I wanted and got a senior partner with a ton of incentives. You can't say no.
Hmm.
So from there it was then we had to develop a business plan, which is pretty rigorous
Mm-hmm.
because you can't just say, and this is an issue I see with a lot of people. I have an idea, I want you to use your network to get it funded, and then we can go into business. That's not how it works.
Right. You gotta have the
You
plan first.
you have the plan, you have to call like over 100 people to get ideas on as to how your plan could be placed and implemented. You're talking to doctors, you're talking to insurance companies. Can you code for this drug if it comes out? How will it be used? How will it be delivered? And so after you get that information, then you start getting your business plan together so you can start pitching. You're talking about writing grants for the NSF. You're talking about going to venture capital groups. You're talking about working in a biotech incubator so that you don't have to spend your money on capital expenses like
Overhead.
centrifuges,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So that was the other issue. So now we have a company, we're incorporated in Delaware because they have the best business law, the most well-defined business law. Um, Now we need a space, right? We're still finishing business school, but we need space to start experiments. We go to a incubator here and they have just the empty lab and there's
And
nothing
when you say
there.
here, you're talking about
Oh, in
Columbus
Ohio. I'm sorry.
in
Yeah, in
Ohio.
Columbus,
Yeah.
Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
nothing there. So again, networking.
Mm-hmm.
I go back and call, the Alexandria Research Center in Manhattan
Yeah.
on 28th Street and First Avenue. Well, the flavor and fragrance company that I worked for was the first
Back
company to
then.
move in there. Yeah.
Yeah.
We were the first ones to move in 2010, but our name was not on the awning. Nobody knew we were there. So we got to know all the top brass of the people who ran that place, right? So then we got to know all the companies because every time a company moved in, they would ask us, how did you configure your desk? And who did you talk to if the light bulb goes out? So I knew some people, I knew like some pretty big people at Alexandria up in Manhattan, the Science Center. So I called a friend. I was like, hey, would you be interested in investing? He said, no, but we're starting Alexandria Launch Labs NYC. If you apply, I will make sure everybody remembers who you are. And sure enough, we had to go up and pitch. We had to fill out a bunch of paperwork, but we beat out over 220 companies who applied around the world. And we were number 7 out of
To get
20
a
that were
space.
accepted. And we got space. So our lab
Wow.
space was actually in New York. So as soon as we graduated from business school, we had to figure out how we are going to do that. We raised a little money. Say this again, networking. Most of the money we raised was from Saudi Arabia, people I never met.
Wow.
A business school friend went, he had his father had an investment group. He went back to Saudi Arabia and said, and got a group together. Sent this, I mean, it wasn't a ton of money. It was enough to get started though. And then
Right.
my family sent some money in. So what I would do is typical day, I would work odd jobs in Ohio, whether I don't care if it was security, I don't care if it was like at a county fair helping people park cars, I don't care what it was. I'd pay my, support my kids, fly up to New York, sleep on my cousin's floor. She had an apartment in Crown Heights, and then I would go into the lab maybe 10, 11 o'clock in the morning and stay till like 2, 3 o'clock at night. And I would stay as long as I could in New York for like a couple of weeks, doing experiments, talking to VC groups, talking to lawyers, you know, getting next steps together. And that's literally how it is as an entrepreneur. When you talk to people who start companies, you have to be dedicated. They're not going to give you money if you say, well, I'm still working and I can give you 30% of my time. They want to see that you're completely dedicated
All
to
in.
putting your life on hold. Yeah. So that's how it was for a full year. It
And
was,
honestly, a lot of people like, I don't think I want to do. A lot of people say, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to be. Everybody talks about they want to be entrepreneur, entrepreneur, entrepreneur.
yeah.
Like, you gotta really build that business.
Yep. You do.
Um, you have to build it. You have to invest in it. You have to get others invested. You got to network. It's a daily operation. That's what I'm hearing from you. Like it's
Yep.
and it's. I don't know if there's necessarily a typical day, right? It's like so many different types of days.
Yeah. So some days I would just do experiments and
Hmm.
I'm trying to crowd as many as I can in because, like I'm working until my money runs out. Then I have to go back to Ohio and get another job that allows me to kind
Got
of
you.
leave again and go to New York. And I'm applying to, full-time positions just in case all over the country. But I had already taken investor dollars. I have to see this venture through. You
Through.
can't take someone's money and then say, "Oh, I don't feel like doing it anymore." That's not, yeah.
And when you say venture, like when you think about biotech, like you were creating devices, you were creating drugs, you were creating, like, what were you doing? Like, what was
So
your?
this is
I don't want to know what your experiments were, but
mm.
it was drug experiments or what?
So this is a small molecule that
Okay, small molecule. Okay.
now we say it activates stem cells to regenerate damaged tissue, but it
Mhm.
also activated, your hair follicles are produced by stem cells. So it
Mhm.
mobilized stem cells and dormant hair follicles. So you could restore your hair. You could actually restore the color of your hair. Um,
Mhm.
and so
Hold
I
up.
was doing
Hold up.
experiment.
Let me find out for my grades right here, because these grades right here.
So yeah, so I was doing like I was doing experiments just to see like what genes were upregulated, trying to understand like the exact MOA, mechanism of
Cool.
action, and then also part of that is forming collaboration so that you don't have to do all the work. So
Yeah.
I one time we were pitching at Harvard. There was like a big pitch competition from venture capital groups all over the world. We went over there to pitch, did not get selected. But while kind of at the meet and greet later on, two women, Russian women, came up, started talking to us, and we told them, what we did, and they said, "You should meet our friend. He was a professor at King's College in London, world-renowned stem cell expert, but he was also working with a startup in San Francisco." And out of that connection, we end up in San Francisco giving him our drug, and he's testing because he was working for a company that was using um, they were using cells from circumcision. So
Mhm.
you have
Mhm.
once circumcision occurs, you have keratinocytes that are usually thrown away,
Mhm.
but they were actually using those to make leather because they wanted to eventually take cow cells and make vegan leather. And if you think about it, you have a couple billion people who won't wear leather shoes because they come from animals. Well,
Cows.
in this
Yeah.
case, you're not actually killing the animal, you're just using the cells. And so they're trying to tap into that market. He's a stem cell expert, so he's over there helping that. And so we were able to talk to him to test our drug to see if the going the original hypothesis for how it worked was true. And he was able to show us that it was not true, which
Mhm.
meant I didn't have to waste my
Waste
time
time.
doing
Waste
that.
time. Yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
That's how it was running, trying to get a company started.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's amazing what you're doing, because when I think about biology, biomedicine, biotech, so many of us are getting our degrees and we're just thinking about working for somebody else, working at academia. But
Hmm.
you're taking the same things that we're learning and we're doing, and you're creating a company from it,
Hmm.
right? A
Yep.
biotech company. How many of us, especially people of color, I feel like more and more of us should do that. And I
Yep.
hope people are getting bit by the bug of it, getting excited about opportunities in that. So okay, last one. Not biotech engineer. Why is my I need to change this. It says biotech engineer. It should be biotech entrepreneur. I don't know how that happened, but anyway, I'll change the title shortly later. Last question. What are your challenges and favorite parts of your career? So like, what are
Okay.
the tough parts? What are the fun parts?
So the tough parts first.
Mhm.
I'll highlight two. So self-doubt and failure to launch, right? So sometimes it's like, sounds like a good idea, but I'm not going to pursue it. After getting this company and after getting the company off, starting it, and we failed. I actually went back to my old boss, my scientific mentor, and gave him all of my lab space and everything that I owned because we couldn't continue. We didn't raise our Series A round of funding, but we failed forward because people want to start more companies, right?
Mm,
So that kind of erased my self-doubt and said it's worth trying. When I went back to the law group and told them that, we couldn't raise our Series A, out of all of the money they invested and the incentives they gave, we still owed 50,000. And they said, "Don't worry about it. Come back with another idea." And so that kind of told me it's okay if you're honest and you work hard, people will want to work with you even when you fail.
mhm,
So initially I had self-doubt. And then the other issue, racism.
call it
So
what it is.
I'll tell you a story that I'm going through right now. Um, I told you I did everything in reverse. I got 20 years of research experience, mostly in New York in biotech. Came back here, um, and I started working in cell therapy, which is where like you'll take a patient's cells and you'll put in a receptor that helps them like their T cells, helps the T cells recognize a certain protein on a cancer. So
Mhm.
that's clinical, and
And
that's
destroy
actually
it.
called,
It's a way
yeah,
to
and destroy
it's,
it.
it's use your immune system to actually destroy cancer cells by recognizing it. Yeah. Uh huh.
Right. And so it really only works in like bloodborne cancers. They're trying to change it up. But it's a clinical approach, and it's kind of like how they did the COVID vaccine, where it's translational. They didn't go through the original, the usual FDA clinical trials. What they do is they show efficacy and they say, hey, people in need, sick people need it because they'll die without it. These
Mhm.
people they've relapsed after being treated with other forms. We need to give this to them because it's safe. So cell therapy is translational. So I'm working in cell therapy lab at Ohio State. Now, when I accepted the job, I had already been accepted to their um, biological sciences graduate program that I'm in now. So I said, I want to finish my PhD and I want to use the employee tuition reimbursement program to do so. So I'll work full time, but I also take my classes and then I'll do a project at work for my dissertation. Fine, fine. Let's do this. I like this. The director is a white woman. I'm sorry, a Caucasian woman. She loved the idea. Now, what I didn't know was that she was angling. She was trying to find a way to get a promotion. So
Mm.
she was a she was a associate professor, and if you look her up, you will
Watch it now. This
see.
is live. Just let you know this is live. Don't get in
I'm
trouble
not
now.
I'm not saying any names, but if you look her up, you will see that she gave an interview online where she's complaining that she doesn't have a way to get promoted to full professor because she doesn't
Mhm.
bring money in, she doesn't teach she doesn't teach any classes, and she doesn't help PhD students, right? So that was already online. By accepting me as
Me as a
a grad
PhD
student,
student. Hmm.
she got the promotion. So then
Yeah.
what she does is she starts backfilling all Caucasian women, right? So now Ohio State is giving them more money. It's a cost center. This cell therapy group is a cost center in itself. So they're getting money. They're only hiring Caucasian women.
Wow.
Well, I started noticing some issues where safety things weren't being reported for a clinical trial. I also noticed that after 29 months, I was finishing my classes and my dissertation was not being funded, and I was not getting a time to start.
Wow.
And I also noticed that the only other person of color was a Latino man with a PhD from MD Anderson. It's one of the three best cancer centers in America. He
Texas,
was
yeah.
forced out of his job. So he's forced out of his job and noticing anything. So I start complaining. I start, writing letters, working my way up. And eventually, you know, I complained about academic misconduct because she basically just used me to get a promotion and to promote her friends. It all goes
Woo.
crazy. I have a group of five Caucasian women who were actively working to make my life hell, to make sure I
Mhm.
couldn't do my projects, to sending mass emails claiming I made mistakes, and then engaging HR saying I couldn't do my job. But this only happened after I complained,
Right, right,
right?
right, right, right.
Because the only other person of color who was forced out, he didn't complain, and everybody else, even the Caucasian women who would talk to me in secret, wouldn't complain about what they saw. This is to give you an example. This director also hired her daughter's boyfriend because he wants to go to medical school at Ohio State. So she hired him so that he could
Get
pad his resume,
access. Yeah.
pad his, that's the kind of stuff they do to use their position for, you know, to promote self needs. But when I complained, all of a sudden I can't do my job.
Right.
So I actually recently quit my job just to finish my PhD. So I'm just finishing my PhD and getting away from Ohio State.
Mhm.
And so racism plays a huge part.
Huge.
If if you're looking into going to medicine or research, have a thick skin because every black person I've spoken to who's dealt with Ohio State has had to deal with something like this. And it's not just Ohio State. They have great
Right.
people there. It's just a few people who engage in this type of activity and a whole lot of people who refuse to report it. And that's throughout the country. You're going to see that everywhere.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm glad that you're brave enough to say that, and I feel like I don't know if it's getting better. I feel like after affirmative action was removed, I feel like it's gonna get exponentially worse, Khalid. I think it's gonna be exponentially worse. But like you said, you got to stand up yourself.
You do. So there was a guy, Oakwood connection. There was a guy named Dr. Hale who used to be the
Yeah,
president of
he
Oakwood,
used to be at Ohio State. Like
right?
he a lot of
So,
connections between Oakwood and Ohio
yep,
State because of him. Yep, I remember.
yep. So my grandparents were good friends with him. My mom's good friends with his family. But there's a cultural center named after him at Ohio State. In the 70s and 80s, he made Ohio State the largest producer of black doctors. So that's
Mhm.
PhDs, JDs, MDs.
Yeah.
And he would engage NAACP and all these groups to make sure that blacks and minorities were treated fairly. When he died, all that work went to the wayside. So now, like OSU's diversity and initiative, I'm sorry, D&E, is that what it is?
DEI and I,
D,
diversity,
yeah,
equity, and inclusion. Yeah.
yeah. Their DEI is more so based for LGBTQ and not for minorities.
Yeah.
And there's no one fighting for that. So
Yeah.
yeah, you have to understand when you go into something where you're underrepresented, especially in sciences, you're going to deal with this, and people know that you don't have much backing. There's no
Advocate.
Dr. Hell. Yeah, there's no advocate at Ohio State now, and so they will act the way that this director for cell therapy has acted towards me, knowing that there's very little chance of that they'll actually have to pay a price. But we have to complain. We have to take it as far as we can, and I'm definitely doing that. I love fighting racism, so yeah.
Shout out to Khalid for fighting racism. And I think more and more of us need to do that. And but we got to be in those spaces.
Yep.
Got to be in those spaces. That's how we have to put ourselves in these kind of spaces and be willing to fight it. All right, but it's okay. Outside of that, that's the bad news. Those are the bad news. We're gonna
Yeah.
give me the good news. What's the favorite part?
Favorites.
Yeah.
So problem solving. I love waking up thinking, hey, I know about this receptor, and what I'm doing now is I'm using RNA. So RNA that doesn't get translated to protein, they're aptamers. And RNA can fold in the same way that a protein would, and it can act like an antibody. It can block a a receptor. It can activate a receptor. It can block another, it can act as a messenger molecule that's not being translated to protein. So with that now, I constantly have ways of problem solving. Competitive analysis is something I learned in business school. Like, hey, if I have an idea, what could it, where would it be placed in the market? How long would it be in the market? What are the competitors right now? Um, how do they stack up? What's the chances of success? I like competitive analysis. I like teaching. Love teaching younger people about science. Before I, like got the job that I was working, I was substitute teaching for a little bit at middle schools with disenfranchised students in Columbus. There were three schools, and in all the three schools, they had never met a black scientist before. So it was
Yeah.
great, kind of showing them we can do it. Fourth thing is developing novel and safer therapies. Um,
Mm,
yeah, and then last is learning how this cell biology and biochemistry kind of forms in with creation. I'm not the most religious person, but like the more I learned about cell biology, the more I believe in God,
mm,
because it just these things were put together so that people like you and I and the listeners can have something to do because
mm.
because so that we can understand life a bit more. Because as soon as we think we've discovered an atom, no, there's something smaller. There's
Right.
something smaller. We're down to quarks and whatever neutrinos now. And so I think you know this allows us to understand creation a lot more.
Wow, so you really love what you're doing. It's not for the faint of heart. I'm hearing that you have to have a lot of integrity. I'm hearing that you have to have a thick skin.
Yep.
You have to you have to be able to handle failure and criticism. But there's so much to build from. Like you said, biotech, you can create therapies and
Yep.
you can understand God more. Like you
Yep.
sound like you really love what you do, no matter how difficult it may seem, no matter how challenging it may seem. You really love what you do. Yeah, thanks
Yeah.
so much, Khalid. Anything else you want to say before we close? This was a great interview. I really got
Just
a good understanding about being an entrepreneur and in science. Yeah, go ahead.
I love what you're doing. Like I want us to use our network even more. Like, because your platform gets the word out, and then, we need to be able to get a platform together of like Black funders and people who can get access to spaces where, things can be research can be done. But yeah, I guess the biggest thing I can tell people is when you're a scientist, don't just be a scientist. Think about
Mhm.
how your project translates into value, not just money, but therapies for people who are underrepresented in medicine.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Therapies, whether it be biomedical therapies, educational therapies,
Hmm.
psychological therapies,
Yep.
like we have to help our people. And we can't just work for other people. We can't just work for other, I'm getting my soapbox real quick. We can't just work for other people
You
and
can't.
solve other people's problems and then complain about our problems.
You
and
you will
and,
get
and then
that.
and then complain about our problems and how other people who are disenfranchising our people complain how they do it. Like there's so many ways that we are disenfranchised as a people, but it
Mhm.
requires entrepreneurs to solve that problem, to get in the way of the disenfranchisers and be
Yep.
better for our people.
Yeah, or else you'll be like me looking at that $1 check. You signed away all that work and
Yeah.
and you got a patent, but you got nothing from it. Yeah,
Yeah.
you wanna own your work, and you wanna open the door for someone like you to come in, someone younger, someone who's interested to come in and do the same. Yep.
Absolutely. Um, awesome way to close. I am the phenomenal STEMist,
I
and
like that.
so is he. Good night, everybody.
Good
I see
night.
you, Brianna. I see you, Ma. I see a couple of people. Thanks for watching.
All right.